Hello, everyone, and welcome to Red Alert Diaries with Tanya E. Hood. I am Tanya E. Hood, a wife, a mother, and an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, it simply means that I've worn a lot of different hats in my life that have helped me develop a full range of strategies and actionable steps that I've used to help my clients make a strategic impact, both personally and professionally. Red Alert Diaries is based on the life lessons from my premier book, Red Alert. Is He the One? The Pocket Guide to Finding the Love of Your Life. This shares information about how to grow and develop through various things. And if you've read my book, then you already know that I got married at 21. And after 11 years of marriage, I found myself going through a divorce, having to raise my two sons alone. To reset my life and survive my divorce, I took the time I needed to get to know me better, which allowed me to open up to new love again, which proves there is life after divorce. Today, we're going to have a discussion about dealing with the resentment from your past, releasing it from your present, and living free so that your future will no longer be impacted. Our special guest today is Mr. Scott Avery. Scott joins us today with this insight so that you can have some information that can be supportive. So I encourage you to grab pen and paper. And I need to turn on my screen so that you can see me as well. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We want you to be sure that you can get what you need out of this session. So get your pen and paper. Scott has a lot of information that he's going to share with you because in addition to coming into his new marriage, he specializes in transforming people through the restorative process of releasing anger and resentment in their life. You do not want to miss this. So be sure that you gain the insight you need. He is a member of the group, so you can tap into this information with him a little bit later as well. Scott, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your insight and joining us today. And for those of you that have not joined us in the live Zoom, you've got to be here because there's comments that's going to happen in the chat. There's information and discussions that we typically have along the way. So we want to make certain that you're here. Scott, welcome.
Hello,
Give a
Tanya.
quick
Hello.
insight.
Thank you very much for that awesome introduction. I appreciate it. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I can hear you okay.
Okay, good. It's interesting. Thank you for bringing me in the Life After Divorce group and setting up this the Red Alert Diaries. And I was noticing the title of your book, or the sort of the subheading, is He the One? That's a good question, right? And sometimes it takes going through a hard experience to really learn how we know, is he the one, or is she the one, or are they the one, right? And that was true for myself as well. I'm sure we'll get into my backstory a bit and why it is that now I help people through the process of releasing resentment. And like you mentioned, it is a restorative process in that it restores your hope and faith that you can find what's right for you out there. Because a lot of people, when they've been through a bad experience, a bad relationship, and they think, I'm never going to date again. I'm done with men. I'm done with women. They're all whatever, right? Part of this process, or the reason we want to release resentment, is to get rid of that sort of feeling, that sort of attitude, to know that we can create a new life for ourselves. We can find happiness again. We can educate ourselves so that we don't make the same mistakes. I remember after my first marriage ended, I wrote out a huge list of things that I knew were things I wanted to change about myself, things I wanted to work on, things I knew that I had to improve on in order to one day, I want to grow old with a companion, right? I don't want to be alone forever. But I knew that if I wanted to have a good, healthy, long-term relationship again, that there were certain things I had to do. And one of the biggest ones was, and at the time I didn't know it as resentment, I just knew that I had a problem with relating to women, and I really wanted to work on that so that I could be a better partner, just be a better human. And so that was a large focus of the roots of why I really grasped onto this whole idea of releasing resentment. So, and now I'll take a little drink.
Well, that's a lot of information that you're sharing, but we will be able to walk through this because there's a strategy that we have and some insight that he wants to share with you. So let me give you a quick view of what we're going to continue to talk about today. So Scott is going to give us more ideas about how we deal with our past. You just heard his story about how he dealt with some elements from his past. And then we're going to go through how do you deal with that now? Because like many of you, I have also gone through the trauma and the turmoil of trying to figure out how to get through the chaos from my divorce. See, I got married at 21, and after 11 years of marriage, I found myself going through a divorce, having to raise my 2 sons alone. That past trauma kept showing up in some ways. And now you get the chance to have some insight that I did not have to walk through, to know how to move through that so that your future is not impacted. Scott, can you give us a little more insight now about how did you make it through the past?
Right, and that's funny. Like yourself, I was also in my first marriage for 11 years. Well, I guess 10 years and a bit, and most of it was white knuckling through the hard times. Because the problem partly too is once you're in it, you think, well, I'm here. I got to make the best of it. I got to make this work. You're already invested in, and so it's really hard to be objective sometimes in those cases. So, sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. It might be on my end. Hello, test. Okay, I think it's better now. Thank you. So sorry, where do I leave off there, Tanya?
That's just giving some insight about what happened, because you've gone through this. We have both gone through the 11-year journey. That number.
Right, exactly. Okay. So as far as the journey, and we were talking about, and what I'll get more into is about how the past and future are related and affect your present. A lot of people think, like, we have that term emotional baggage, and the way I like to term it is that, you're carrying suitcases full of all the hard feelings and emotional turmoil of this past relationship. And the work I do is really focused on a major past relationship that you're still carrying resentment. And the way I define resentment in the terms of my program is a persistent complaint. So it could be a persistent complaint could be something like, he is late picking up the kids for our custody exchange, and he's been late every time for the last 5 years, and here he goes and does it again. Now, the truth might be he was late 5 years ago, and then another time, it's been spotty here or there. But when you have this resentment, when even a little thing like that happens, it brings back all the emotion and all the pain that you had in the relationship back to you right in that moment. And that's unfair to you, right? Because if we can separate it and if we treat each moment as its own unique experience, not the whole relationship come crashing down on you all again in that one moment, the idea is to break that and sort of separate them out so we can deal with things as they come. And so when I talk about the past, for example, I have an example just from yesterday. So when we talk about persistent complaint, for the majority of the work I do is with people that are dealing with ex-partners, usually an ex-spouse or someone they have children with. Or the next most common one I deal with is people that have resentment for a parent, because those are really long relationships, right? They're very deeply seated in us. So it's usually a parent or a past spouse or partner. So the example I was going to give is I got an email from my ex-wife yesterday. So what's going on right now is I'm going through some it's called restorate, or like a therapeutic process with some of my children, and we've had a long, messy court case. And so my kids live with my ex-wife, and so I didn't have as much access as I wanted. I didn't see them as much as I wanted. It affected our relationship, and so one of my children in particular started to pull away. And it wasn't because of something going on in particular in our relationship. It's all the other things surrounding it. It's known as parental alienation. Well, one parent talks badly about the other parent in order to create sort of a campaign of that child wanting to distance themselves from the targeted parent, targeted being the parent that's the target of the alienation. And so the email I received yesterday was from my ex-wife about something to do with the therapy that we're going through. Something that would potentially delay it yet again. So my persistent complaint of my ex-wife was that she would use the court process to interfere in my relationship with my kids. Now, this is going back about 10 to 11 years. We separated in 2011, and then it took a few years, but then we started getting into court and all of that mess. And so she would do these things that would delay court or interfere with my access and not cooperate with court orders. So this became a large part of the emotional turmoil I was feeling back then. So now, maybe a few years after that sort of stuff was done, again, I would get an email. It could be about anything. But as soon as I see her name, right, in my inbox, I get that feeling of like, oh, I gotta get ready for a fight, or I gotta get ready for some sort of conflict, or what bullshit's gonna happen now? That's that would be the feeling I would get. I think a lot of us can relate to that, right? When you see a message or something come through, and it could be innocuous, but we don't know. But all we have to do is see their name in that inbox. And that's how I was for a long time. I just knew, oh, there's going to be more hassle or more trouble, or it's going to cost me money. All those things from the past would just dump on me in that very moment.
So let's pause, because you
Right.
have said a mouthful.
I know. I'm
We've
sorry. I
gone
go on
through
and
the
on.
thought with the kids, because I've gone through that sort of trigger moments, and you have
Right.
expressed a lot of triggers that have occurred.
Right.
We have to, one, recognize what it is.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you sharing this story, because lots of times we don't realize that the resentment that we often feel gets built up off of the small things. It's that one little thing that you once did. And now that I am supposedly free from you, since we've gone through the divorce process, I still have to walk through experiencing this again and again. Give us one step that you have walked through in that moment, because you shared a lot of the experiences that you have. So I know that there's a lot that can connect. And we have guests that are here, because this is an interactive session. So
That's
I encourage you now, if you like to come off your turn your cameras on, ask Scott a question. If there's something specific that you have gone through now that you have heard his story, because I know he was tiptoeing on a few things that I have walked through. And I'm like, I went through that. There has to be a strategy for this. That is why we share this information, especially so that you can have the tools. Because lots of times we don't know how to get through the process. And often we feel like we're the only ones. So you hear, you are not the only one. But you also recognize, because both of us have come out on the other side, there is life after divorce. So for those of you that are here on Zoom with us, would you like to ask a quick question or share a quick comment that you've heard so far? And we are streaming live, so there's one comment that was there, and I'll check and get back with you on that one while we have the rest of the discussion. Anyone? And thank you guys for being here as well. All right. Well, hearing none. Well, Scott, give us the technique that you use to walk through that path to move into the next step. Is this where you would like for me to share what you have put in place? Because you have some things that you have given as support.
That's right. What about, we'll get into the impact of language, that slide. But first, I just wanted to wrap up when I was talking about getting that email from the ex-wife, and how in the past, and I probably everyone watching this can relate to this. I'm sure I'm not unique in this experience, right? But the idea is that now it's been years and I've done the work, so that now when I got, like I said, I got this email yesterday about this therapeutic process my children and I are going through. And I don't see it, and I don't get the panic anymore. I don't get the, oh, here we go, or here's more blah, blah, blah. That just doesn't happen anymore. I see it more like any business-related email I might get. And the reason, and actually we'll get into part of how I've achieved that. But that was the goal, was to not be so reactive, be more control of my own, be a master of my own domain, just be in control of my emotions, be so less reactive. That's really what it is, right? And I'll give an example of this very good friend of mine where she had, again, not a great relationship with her husband. They broke up, and he would often be late picking up the kids for their exchanges. And that's why I kind of gave this example a little earlier, because it's one that often comes to mind. And there was one time when he was supposed to be picking up the kids. He was about he texted, said, hey, I'm going to be about half an hour late. Sorry, I'll be there. But for her, that's not what she read. What she reads is, you don't matter. The kids don't matter. I never cared about you, and you're not worth me, being on time. that's what she reads or that's what her mind tells herself when she reads that. But really, it's just like, hey, I'm gonna be half an hour late. So that's the cycle we want to break with this whole idea of releasing resentment. So Tanya, if we want to get into, I'm sorry, I keep saying Tanya. It's Tanya, right?
Tanya.
Tanya. I'm gonna make a note.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
My
But
apologies. Okay, yeah. So here we go. All right. So one of the techniques I use and that I teach with this whole idea of releasing the impact of the past so we can kind of leave the past in the past is about cleaning up our language. So I'll read this here. Language not only expresses our experience, it imprints and stores the experience in the words we use. Memory is stored by language and is mood dependent. Language triggers the moods that come with memories. So what are the repeated ways you describe an unwanted memory, complaint, or person you resent? And now this comes back to the idea of the past coming back up by using the words that we could call them trigger words if you like. I tend not to use that term, but it's a real term. People know what it is. And so for me, this was really about cleaning up my language so it wouldn't impact me so much. And I'll give you an example. And I actually, this is an example that I think a lot of people can relate to. If you've ever called your ex crazy, or if you ever called your ex a narcissist without them being clinically diagnosed as a narcissist, because then it'd be factual, then you're using language, this kind of a language that will bring up all those emotions again. So if you're sitting there telling your friends about a story about your crazy ex, oh, she's so crazy, listen what she did, da 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 da. When you do that, you're actually reinforcing the story you're telling yourself about that person. And you're more likely to feel those feelings again when you use a term like that. When you say, oh, listen to what my crazy ex did now and what she's doing now. And all those feelings just kind of rush back because you're using those kind of terms that make you remember all those hard times and all those bad memories. And then they all just come flooding back in that moment. So one of the first things, and this is actually in the second session that I do people with. We do this exercise about cleaning up language. And it's not just about using words that are sort of pejoratives like crazy or narcissist. It could be a combination of words. It could be name calling, or just things like, you know, we'll get into it in a second with the language cleanup exercise. Do you want to do that now? We can do that now, and I'll give you some good examples of what I'm talking about.
Sure. Let's walk through it, because
Sure.
the thing that I love about having these sessions is that we get the chance to do an interactive way to walk through what we're discussing. When you get the clear clues about what's happened in my past, you need to know how to work through the action steps of your present. So let's talk about this language cleanup.
Right on. Okay, so to preface all of this, how this works is, and if you're in the chat and you want to chime in and play and work along with us, that will be great. What the idea here is to recognize our language, whether it's a description of what actually happened, or is it the story we tell ourselves about what happened. So to use my friend, for example, the story was that, oh, he's going to be late picking up the kids, so I'm worthless. He doesn't respect me. This will be going on for the next 20 years. Like that's the story. The description of what happened was just, he's going to be late to pick up the kids. So we don't have to add more onto it. So the idea of looking at language is to separate factual descriptions from the story we tell ourselves about what happened. Okay, so we'll go through this exercise here. And if you want to put in the chat, whether it's a story or a description, that's fine. Or if you just want to say it to yourselves, that's cool. We'll go through this stuff. And this is an exercise that I do with people, again, to help. It's training. It's training yourself to clean up your language so that you're less likely to feel the impact of the resentment coming back. That's the whole idea. Okay, now I'll have a little bit of water, then we'll do this. Here we go. Oh, I know, I talk fast. I'll try to slow down a bit, Tanya. Okay, the last few times that we argued, you yelled at me. So would that be a story or a description? Now, why is that a description? The last few times we argued, you yelled at me. While there is emotion in there, it is a factual description. It's almost like you can think of it like a tabloid article versus a police report, where a police report sticks with the facts, where a tabloid article can sensationalize things for emotional reaction or clickbait. So the idea is we want to have a police report rather than a tabloid article when we're describing our experiences. Okay, so the next one. You spent $45 when we could have spent less. So would that be a description or a story? What do you think, Tanya? I'm putting you on the spot. There we go. It's a description.
I'm trying not to get into fear because I know I have it
Right.
toggled on while I'm on the screen. So to see you speak, if I speak, it goes back and forth. So I was trying to be on mute, but yes, description is what I was guessing. Yay!
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Tanya, for that. Yes. And you're right. Description. Yeah, it's factual. Even though you can see there's a bit of there's information in there about how the person is feeling, but sometimes that information is something we assume. We don't really need to assume people's feelings. So we spent $45 when we could have spent less. Factual, could be maybe there's a $45 shirt and a $20 shirt. And we bought the $45 shirt. Well, you could have bought the $20 shirt. Save some money. All right. It's 6:30. She said she would be here by 6. She's late. So this is one that can be a little tricky. Is it a story or a description? Let's see. Go ahead, Tanya. It's a description. That's right. This one trips people up because you can sense emotion in it, but it's not necessarily about removing all emotion because we're humans. We have emotion, but it's about being factual in our description. So is this a factual description? Yes, it is. It's 6:30. So that's a fact. She said she'd be here by 6. That's a fact. She's late. Those are all factual descriptions. It's not adding emotional, flowery, or sensationalized information into it. Okay, here we go. He abandoned me at the mall. Story or description? All right, go ahead, Tanya. That's right. It's a story. And why is it a story? Because the abandoned. Abandoned is a emotionally loaded word. It can mean a lot of things. In fact, it could be the story in the previous example. She's late, right? But now you turn that into he abandoned me, or really she abandoned me at the mall. Because we don't know that that's the truth. That is the information, the emotional extra information a person is putting in or assuming, really assuming the mindset of the person that was supposed to pick them up. And I think that's where the mistake comes. It could just be traffic was busy and all these things happen. But when we change it to he abandoned me, now when you retell that story, you're going to say, remember that time that blah, blah, blah abandoned me at the mall and they were supposed to pick me up? Now we're just feeling our resentment again. It's all coming back. But when you stick to the facts, it's much less likely you're going to feel the impact of that moment all over again. All right. She only thinks of herself. And let's see what we have. Story? Yeah, that's a story, right? Huge assumption. And plus, of course, people don't always only think of themselves. That's a very absolute sort of statement. And absolute statements are almost going to be incorrect. Like using words like never and always most commonly mean that statement is probably going to be factually incorrect. So it's a story because we're making assumptions. And now let's go to I was abused. Story or description? Right, this is both. This is another one that can be tricky. It really depends on the context. A lot of this stuff we need to remember is not black and white. The world isn't black and white. If we think in black and white, often we'll be incorrect. We have to look at the nuance and context of all things. So I was abused can be a description of factual things that happened. It can also be an emotional story about something from the past where abuse can mean a lot of things. So without getting into a description, that's why we need to focus on descriptions more so to be factual. Okay, if you say I was abused, well, what were the actual facts? He yelled at me. She hit me. Whatever it is. Because we've heard the word abuse sometimes sort of thrown around, maybe not with less justification. But that's why it can be either or, depending on the context. He made me go to the football game with him and his friends. Story or a description? I wonder. Let's see. That's right, it's a story. What makes it a story? There's one word in there that makes it a story, and that word is made. Because if you take that part out, we'd say, I went to the football game with him and his friends, factual statement. He made me. Well, what does that look like? Again, it's going to have, chances are it's going to be a story. The context matters. If they physically took this person and dragged them into a car physically and forced them to go to a football game, forced them through the gate, that's force. They made him. Okay, sure. But we know that that's not the scenario this person's talking about, right? They were probably influenced or coerced, come on, let's go, da-da-da. And that turns into made me, which means they're not taking any accountability for their actions. A big part of this language cleanup exercise is about seeing where we have responsibility. Because if you'll see a theme through a lot of these is about blaming the person. He abandoned me at the mall. She only thinks of herself, like it's blame. So when we can clean up our language, we're more likely to be able to take accountability for our part. And that's where a lot of change can happen, is when we take accountability for things. So for example, in here, he made me go to the football game. If a person really, in this scenario, again, I'm just making up a scenario. If they really don't want to go, they just say, no, I'm not going. You guys go, just, without being, pressured by their friends. So there is some culpability in both parties. My mother spent less time than what I wanted from her when I was young. Description or story? It's a description, right? Now we can hear the language in there that will help us assume an emotion this person is saying. They're saying they wanted more time with their mom. That's a description. It's not just a story. Or it's not a story because it is a factual description. If a person wanted, I'll just pick a number, say an 8 out of 10 presents with their mom, and they got a 2 out of 10 presents with their mom, then they're saying, well, I really wanted the 8 out of 10. That's a factual description of how they were feeling. It's not introducing extra language or emotional language to sensationalize it. It's pretty factual. All right, I'm the victim here. Story, right. Yeah, I think that one is pretty easy for us to spot. Because victim is in itself is not an objective word. Again, it's sort of with the one where I was abused, where it could be, there's a whole range of things that could be depending on the context, right? But typically the way that this sentence is phrased is a story. It's not a description of what happened. It's their reaction, their emotional reaction to what happened. So that's why if we stick to a description of what happened, then we're less likely to feel the emotional impacts of that again. So if you're telling a story and you're saying I'm the victim here, you're feeling those feelings again of possibly of the abuse that happened. Or I'm not saying a person who says this is wrong. I'm just saying we want to remove the emotional impact of the past on us now, and part of the way of doing that is changing the language we use. So I'm not saying that they aren't right to say something like this. It's just about helping that person. That's the goal of it. So that's why we're doing this exercise. And the last one, I am super dad. Story. It's a story. And I'll tell you why that story, why this particular example is up. So it wasn't long after my first wife and I split up. And she started doing a couple things that I felt were not in my kids' best interest. I won't get into them, but I remember thinking, wow, I have to step up my game, as dad. I can't just be dad. I have to be super dad. So I actually wrote a list called Super Dad's Code of Conduct. And I believe it was, I think there were 8 or 10 items on it. It was about how I wanted to show up for my kids and what I wanted to do, but I wasn't doing it. At the time, it wasn't because of just for his own sake. It was a reaction to what I felt my ex-wife was doing wrong. So I was like, okay, well, if she's doing that, then I have to do this. So that's why it's a story, not a description. Because a description, what does super dad mean, right? Again, context will matter. But it also goes to show that not all stories we tell are negative. Not all of them are negative. So when I say I'm super dad, that doesn't bring up negative emotions for me. I'm not feeling bad about something in the past. I'm remembering standards I set for myself, almost like a declaration I'm making about who I want to be. So not all stories are bad. That's why I put that last example in there. So I hope that kind of makes some sense on what we can do. This is in our daily lives, folks. When I talk about my ex-wife, if I'm recounting something from the past or something currently, I never use the word like crazy. I used to say that. Oh, my ex is crazy. I have cut that out of my language years ago because I said to myself, one, I don't want to ever accidentally say that around my kids, for example. So if I just remove that from my language, then I'm not going to accidentally say it. And secondly, it's not fair to her because I'm not describing what happened. I'm just putting this pejorative word on her that's supposed to be this catch-all and to get sympathy. Oh yeah, man, yeah, I had a crazy ex too. I get it. So you feel it. You see what I'm saying, Tanya?
So I'm glad you're mentioning this because this is one of those things that come up lots of times. What do we say? The language cleanup? Oh, I want to thank you for giving those examples and giving us an active view of what this truly looks like. Because I know for me, I had to be intentional with what I would say about my ex when my children wanted to speak to their father or ask about their father. I still had those raw emotions. Some of it was story built off of a lot of descriptions, but it was still mine. As a result, I didn't want to transfer what I was feeling onto my kids. So I
Right.
had to be intentional with my words. And for a long time, I just created a standard mantra because that's exactly what it was. It was a mantra. I just repeated it over and over again because I could not get anything out. And for me, because of how I was raised, I just used my religious base and used the mispa that we do at church when we say, we'll see you next time. My children were familiar with the mispa, so it made it easy and it triggered in their mind what I wanted. Pray for your father. Think good about your father. He may not be present here at this moment, but we still need to make sure that we include him in asking God to be present so that for them also, because he had a lot of things that he was beginning to do to them that he did to me. And I know that you made the statement, don't make the story of abandonment, but it still felt like that.
Right.
What he had done, what I felt was abandoning to me, he was beginning to do to our children. So to give them a technique and a strategy as well of how to move through that moment because they were young, they didn't know. But if they recognize to say, have God be where he is, because we're not really certain. But even if I'm not present with you, through God, I'm always together with you. That was a helpful tool that helped them get a little more grounded, gave me a way of cleaning up my language because I could not state all the other stuff that was in my head. If we're going to include God in the conversation. So thank you for sharing that. For
You
those of
bet.
you that are here on Zoom, you can come off of your camera and share any comments, questions, or thoughts because I know there has to be something out of all the information that Scott has shared with us today that may be something that you've been impacted by, some insight that you can bring to today's story. Would you like to share?
And Tanya, you were mentioning about how with your own children you were changing your language and using the language of church that they were already familiar with. And I think that's a really important point in that we have as leaders in our home, we create a culture in our home.
Yes.
And we get to determine what that's going to be like. Is it going to be a culture where mom or dad or the ex is talked negatively about in front of the kids? Are we going to create a culture where there's respect and honor for those people as ex-partners and parents of these children? Because regardless of how we feel, I'm going on my soapbox here, regardless of how we feel about our exes, we have to remember that our children feel their parents are part of them. When you insult the other parent, that child is feeling it as part of them as well. My oldest son, he's 20 now. We look very much like. Well, I mean, he's not bald with a beard, but the rest of us, we have a similar mannerisms. We look the same. And my ex-wife, this is just my own personal view of it or observation, was that she was always a little harder on him. I think it's because he reminded her of me, because she still holds on to a lot of resentment for me, and so it's difficult for her to separate. And so the talking badly about me, he became a target of it, and it harmed him emotionally. And so he's going through steps to help undo that harm now. So I'm glad to see that. But that's part of why this whole process about releasing resentment is so important. Because hey, if we didn't have kids with someone, we can just walk away, and it's a little
Maybe.
eso right?
It's a little easier,
It's a
but
little
there's
easier.
still some chaos that still goes
Absolutely,
with that.
absolutely. And so when we have those people, and we know they're going to be in our lives forever to a certain degree, weddings, family, significant events, right? We're going to see them. So I think it's a responsibility we have to make peace with our past. Make sure in that moment, we don't have to like our exes, but in that moment, if we're there for our child's graduation, even if we're sitting on opposite ends of the gymnasium, create a culture of where your child feels safe, and they know that, hey, even if our parents are in the same room and they don't like each other, there's not going to be some incident, there's not going to be a scene, right? Kids don't want that. So that's the part of why this is so important to me, to help people, to help break that cycle, because I see it all the time in the group life after divorce. I see it all the time in people that are hurting, and they're holding a lot of resentment for their ex, which is understandable for a certain time, but in the long run, it hurts you. It harms you. It's going to affect your kids, because if you don't let go of that, the kids are going to pick up on those subtle cues. Oh, it's your turn to go to dad's this weekend. You know what I mean? Like,
We don't
kids
pay
pick up
enough
on that.
attention to the undertones. So I'm glad you shared that, because even though I fixed the statements with my words, so the mantra made it easy, but the undertone I eventually learned as my children got older was still there, and I had to work on that. So for those of you that may be walking through this journey where you have children that you know you have to send away, and for some of you, this may be the first time your babies have ever been away from you. It will be difficult. But if you have a positive outlook, give encouragement to them along the way, they'll be strengthened by that. That will give them a sense of confidence. What I later learned is that with my oldest one, because with him, he had been, well, he was 11 years old. Say I got married at 21, y'all. So that journey was right in line with the kid. So with him, he had enough time and space and energy with the two of us together. So he was really connected to his father. If you threw me on the side of the road, I don't think he would have cared, because he was a daddy's boy. So when we got divorced, I had to do extras to encourage him, to let him know, yes, we may not be together, but the love that we have for you will not change. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. And I had to be cognizant of ensuring that I fueled confidence in his soul, that he could be present as long as he wanted to if his father was there. And to encourage him, go through this process. It's going to be okay, and shore him up where I can. So when they come back from the visits, if things are different than what they were when you all were together, you got to sit down and sort of do a debrief and emotional soothing. Because the thing about being a mother that we bring to our children the fact that somebody sees them. We have always been there. Often the first face that they ever saw was yours. The comfort that they usually give is yours. So we see our children and we comfort them through their process. What the father often gives is a sense of security and a sense of safety. And so that has been removed from their environment, and they're not quite sure what to do with it. And often we're not quite sure what to do with it either, because that same safety and security that we were seeking in our lifelong marriage that we intended to have is not there. So we go through those things that Scott was just sharing. It was another chipping away at a trigger. Maybe you were a daddyless daughter like me. Maybe you were an individual that didn't have someone that totally secured the reins for you as a child. So you don't have the tools. That is why we share this. So I encourage those of you that are listening, tap into the resources that you need. Find coaches and counselors. They do different things. If you need to go through therapy, go through therapy. And if you feel you need to have addition to give you strategy, find a coach. That is something different that we as coaches provide, which is why I share with you, I'll take your pen and paper, because we give you actionable steps. And today, Scott has given you a way to work on cleaning up your language. So Scott, before we run out of time a little bit, I wanted to let you say a few more things on this and let us go through the next little part, and we will have to start wrapping this out.
All right. Well, a slide you shared earlier where with the past, present, and future. So I've talked about the past. I want to talk a little bit about the future. Where we have these actions in our past. Here we go. Yeah. So we have the past, these things that happened to us in the past, and they're affecting us now. But the thing is, it's actually not the past that affects us. It's a bit of a trick where I'll use the example of my friend who got the text that said, I'm going to be 30 minutes late picking up the kids. She's taken all those things that happened in the past, right? All the times he disrespected her, and all those feelings. What she's actually doing is projecting them into the future. Because what goes on in our subconscious dialogue is, okay, he's disrespecting me now, and he's going to disrespect me for the next 20 years. And so I'm feeling that right now because you're anticipating this future of disrespect and hassle and all these things, and you feel it, and then you sit here and you feel it right now. Especially for anxiety, that's where a lot of that anxiety comes from. Is this taking the past, projecting it into the future, and it happening to us now. So part of and I'm glad you talked about therapy versus coaching because they are very different. I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. I have, like, if you hire a wellness coach, so okay, you want to lose 20 pounds in 3 months? Okay, here's the plan. This is how we're going to do it. Right? That's a coach. So for me, I call myself a wellness coach. Okay, you want to let go of resentment? Okay, I'm going to take you through this process for the next 3 months and at the end goal. Now, it doesn't mean you release resentment. You're fixed. You're cured. What it does is it gives you the tools you get to use for years and years and years. Just like those 3 months with that fitness coach, he's going to teach you the tools to now use for the next years into your life, right? It's the same thing with what I do. And I just want to make that note, just to be very clear, therapy and coaching are different things. And some people need professional therapists. I am not one of those. I don't claim to be. So I have a very sort of niche scope of what I do. And so the idea is to break that cycle with the past. We project it into your future, and then it's impacting me now. So if I give the example of getting an email from my ex-wife, where now when I see an email from her, I no longer anticipate another 10 years of dragging me through court or interfering with custody access. Now I look at it as the future is like a blank slate. And I love it that it's a blank slate. Because I'm no longer putting all of these emotions and the past history into the future, looking down that road. Can you imagine if you have 10 years of court proceedings and money and all those things? I mean, I'm 11 years in. We're still going to court over kid stuff and custody stuff. But I no longer feel dread. I no longer feel like when I see your email pop up, I was like, okay, something I have to deal with. Right? I no longer feel the weight of all those years on me in that moment. And then again, the future anticipation is not there. I see a blank slate. I see a life I get to create. And a lot of that is due to releasing the resentment. And I'm glad, Tanya, you let us go through this language cleanup exercise, because I think that's a really important way to help us to break that connection to those past emotions and deal with things in the moment in a factual basis. Okay, here's an email. She's saying ABC, and I respond ABC. It's life changing. Okay, it was life changing for me to operate that way because, and I'll tell you, just speaking from my personal male perspective, my resentment didn't just stay with my ex-wife. It became women. So I can't trust my ex-wife because she'll try to take advantage of me or hurt me or da-da-da. It became I can't trust women. I only trusted 2 women, my mom and my daughter. That was it for years. And that was an issue with women. That's an issue with me. And I recognize it's an issue with me. And that was one of those things I said to myself, okay, I have to work on this. How can I ever have a relationship again, a healthy relationship, if I don't change that? And I'm pleased to say I got remarried 3 years ago, and it's awesome. It's great. It's the relationship I always wanted, and we have no fear of being real and truthful with each other. And part of that is because we have that blank slate future where we get to create a future. It's not created for us. We get to create it. If I hadn't released resentment and dealt with the issues I had, I would not have been able to be my authentic self. And that's what I wish for people, is to be their authentic selves. And part of that way is to remove the fear and the baggage of the past. Oh, it's so freeing. So anyways, with that whole past, present, future slide that we had, that's how they're all connected. When we deal with the past so we can clear away the future, then in our present we can have more peace, more self management, more self-control, more hope, more faith that things can work out. All these things. I know I'm sort of being. I don't mean to be dramatic about it, but this
But it's
was the
real
truth for me.
statements because
Yeah.
what you shared, that the resentment that you have for one made resentment for a whole group of people that you had not yet fully encountered. But we often have that happen to us. So today we have some techniques that we can use to give us a start as we walk through this journey to get whole. Because I know for me, I had to really be clear to remember it's not everybody. It's not everybody. It's not everybody. Because for a long time, I was not dating and I definitely wasn't going to do the marriage thing again. Had I allowed that to seal in my heart and in my soul, I would have missed out on my marriage with one of the best men that I feel at the heart of my being God created just for me. My little quirks, he has no issues with. All of what we usually want in a relationship to be totally who we are. I can do that. And it has been 11 years strong, and I would have never imagined. I joke now and say, I've been married for 22 years. Yes, took two people, but I have done marriage. And I still think it's a great thing to do. I have an experience that has given me some things I had to learn because what my first marriage gave me was some insights about Tanya that I never took the time before I got married. Had I taken the time to do the research and on me that I did for my second marriage, that first one may have worked out. See, we often enter into a relationship not fully aware of who we are, what we bring to the table, and how we're truly showing up in the world. So when we take the time to do the discovery, and that may mean the therapist to dig deep to clear up the past so that you can fully show up in the present. And that may mean finding a coach that can give you the tools and strategies to build a future. So today we have given you some insight, and I'm thankful that you've joined us, Scott, to share this information. And you have a special gift that you want to share with the audience. Would you like to talk more about that?
I sure do. Thank you, Tanya. It's funny. I often say the same thing. If I was who I am now, when I had my first marriage, that first marriage would have been a lot different, you know. But yeah. So what we're giving away today is this free workbook. It's what happened versus the story. This whole thing is about the language cleanup exercise that we went through earlier, but a lot more in depth. It leads you through the steps and gives you exercises to do, and it's all about clean up your language. Because for me, that was it's one of the quickest steps to recognize and implement. It's a tool you can use right now. You can literally use right. You can sit back and think, how do I describe my ex in a way that is sensationalizing it or tabloid, like a tabloid article? You write those words down, and then you make a commitment that when you are talking about that person, or even internally talking about it, like your own internal dialogue, if you can remove those words or phrases, you will find yourself easing into conversation more. And for example, when I changed how I describe my ex-wife, I came to have a lot more compassion for my ex-wife. We had a difficult divorce, a difficult situation. We have 4 children together, and they were all young when we got divorced. They were all under 10 years old, or when we separated, they were all under 10. It's very difficult to be a single parent with 4 little kids, and so I went from a attitude of resentment and anger and blame to being much more compassionate for her. So that's my hope for anyone that can take this workbook, go through it. It's a complete A to B. It covers all the steps, and it also does that language cleanup exercise and asks you to do a lot of examples of where in your own life you can clean up your language. And I think it's a great tool, and it's one. It doesn't take a lot of work to implement. You can do it right now, even literally right now. You don't even need the workbook to just do right now. Write down 3 words that you know are maybe unfair ways of describing your ex. Words like crazy, narcissist. Again, narcissism. That's a clinical. You have to be diagnosed by someone, right? But that word gets thrown around so much. I don't think it's fair. Because it's a way of just like demonizing our ex rather than talking factually. I think we need to get more factual, remove that kind of language from how we describe them, and it'll bring us so much more freedom when we can free ourselves from all the emotional baggage of that past. life is much more satisfying. And like Tanya said, if you had brought all that baggage with you into the next marriage or major relationship, what's going to change? You're going to have the same issues you had before. We have to work on ourselves. And that's, I think, a great message for life after divorce, that there is life after divorce. When a friend, my new wife, I got married 3 years ago, a mutual friend introduced us, and she said to my wife, before we started dating, she said, he's not dateable. Now, she didn't mean it as an insult. She was just saying, Scott's not ready for dating. He's still playing the field, or he's whatever it was. But that friend wasn't really aware of all the changes I had made in my life, right? So that by the time I did meet my wife, I was dateable. I was ready, and I was at the point where when we met, it was the right time. So I just want you to know that life after divorce, there is life after divorce, and you get to create that life when you stop reacting to the past so much, and you can create a clearer future, and then boom, you're set yourself up for success. That's what we want to do for people. So, and here we go. Stay in touch with Scott Avery. Did you want to do this part, Tanya, or do you want me to go through this?
You can share how we can stay in touch with you, Scott.
Okay. So a few ways to stay in touch with me. You can email me at mynageeeducation@gmail.com. And my website is scottavery.net. I have a whole lot of information on that website about what I do, why I do it, and how I do it. So I do have a coaching program. It's a 12-week program, and so there's information there about that. And you can also follow me on my personal Facebook, scottavery.1426, as you see right there. And it is my personal Facebook. I share a lot of coaching material there. I give away a lot of free information. Because that's why I'm here. I'm not here to sell you coaching. I'm here to contribute. I want to contribute. That's why I participate in the groups. And I find that there's a lot of people hurting, because that's when they would find a group like Life After Divorce, right? They're hurting. They want support. So I think the group that you put together, Tanya, is great. And the attitude of it, the purpose of it, the positive nature of it, I think is really good. There's so many people hurting out there. So if I can help some of those people, that would be an honor.
So let's pause to see if there's anyone that's currently on the Zoom that has any final comments, questions, or thoughts you'd like to make before we start closing out this session. And thank you guys for being here. We appreciate you being present. We want to make certain that we get any of your comments addressed. If you want to put it in the chat box, you can do that so that we can make certain that we get those answered. And I was checking to see, are there any final comments from anyone? Because we are streaming live.
If people do leave comments later on the video, I'm active in the group. I'll see them, and I'll do my best to answer anything I can.
All right, and thank you guys for being here. Anything you would like to add before we close out? Because if not, I'm going to finalize closing out this session. And thank you guys for being here again.
Yes, thank you everyone who's watching this live and who will watch it afterwards. Appreciate you taking the time. I hope that take advantage of that giveaway of that PDF. I think it'll help. It's a start.
And with that, let us start closing out this session a little bit. Thank you again for being present. For those of you that have joined us for this session, we want to let you know that we're still here to give some insight. There are several sessions that I offer a couple of times a year, specifically for divorcees, because having gone through an experience, I have developed the strategies that I needed to get through that process. So navigating life after divorce, if you want to participate in that session, just let me know. And you can find me on my various social media platforms so that I can contact you and give you some insight about how to move into the next trajectory with that. Because there's a wait list that I have when I'm not hosting it actively. And that gives me an idea if I need to add it a little bit more along the way. So you can reach out to me, TanyaEhood.com, various places on social media. And I thank you for being present for this session. Scott, glad you're here. Glad you're in the group. Glad that you're a support system. And
thank you very much, Tanya. Thank you.
We will say goodbye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.